to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the fact that each of us has something that we can bring to give for the building of God's kingdom. But don't run away. This video is not just about money. It's not only about our ability, but it's about the attitude and our hearts. Hey everybody, it's that Sunday School Girl of thatsundayschoolgirl.com. Welcome to the lesson for Sunday, May 6th. I pray that you had wonderful classes in your Sunday school this week and that there was something gained that you're going to take into this week with you. It's always my prayer that God doesn't just make us receptacles of information, but that He gives us opportunity to be salt and light where we are and to demonstrate those things that we are gaining in our classes, and this week is no exception. If you're new around here, welcome. You have just joined the largest cyber community of Sunday school students on the World Wide Web. We are approaching 10,000 on YouTube, and God is increasing us every single week. And we are not just a group of people sitting, but we are digging into God's word and being made better together, challenging each other in our thoughts and provoking each other to get deeper in God's word so that we are better able to participate in our classes and to activate what we are learning. I am super excited. There are just two things I want to share with you this week because we really do have a good lesson. The two things I want to share, first of all, I want to say thank you. I need to slow down and just say thank you, and you'll see this later on my personal social media. As I'm approaching graduation from law school, I am doing my thank yous on a daily basis because there is no way that I could create one post to thank everyone. And today I want to thank you, my TSSG community. You all have literally been with me from the time I started studying for the LSAT until this very moment. And some of you have been here the entire time. Others of you are new, but wherever I met you along the journey, I cannot tell you what encouragement and what strength I have received from this body of believers. So it hasn't just been about a Sunday school lesson. You all have been personally encouraging to me and continue to pray and speak God's word and His promise over my life. And so today I say thank you to you all in my countdown. And again, you'll see that later in my personal social media. To that end, in terms of celebration, this week is my third blogiversary. It is the 3-year celebration of that Sunday School Girl, born May 1st, 2015, and God has continued to build and to grow and to expand, giving ideas and creativity and connecting us to great people all over the world. And so I want to make sure that you're connected. Make sure that you've hit the subscribe button, click the little icon of that Sunday School Girl. You want to stay connected. There are going to be conversations and trainings and giveaways and a new item or two being launched this month in the TSSG store. As a matter of fact, the very first gift is going to be given away in this video, but it's going to be at the end, so you'll have to wait for it. But I do have a gift for you because I want to thank you for being a part of this and being connected. And so, again, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for your love. Thank you for sharing. And I am excited about what God is going to continue to do in us, with us, and through us together. Let's get into the lesson for this week. Our lesson title is Give Cheerfully and Generously. The Bible basis is Exodus chapter 35, verses 20 through 29, and 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 8. The Bible truth: God welcomes the offerings of those who give with generous and cheerful hearts. Our memory verse is 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6. And the lesson aim is that we will value the account of Israel's offering to build and furnish the tabernacle, appreciate the call to cheerful and generous giving to God, and embrace cheerful and generous giving as a Christian way of life. This week's lesson takes us to a brand new book of study. We've been in the book of Revelation for a couple of weeks, and now we go all the way back to the Old Testament book of Exodus. And we're going to have this conversation about giving. Now, I tend to reflect on the title and the lesson background quite a bit, and it made me think of a couple of things. First of all, we are not born givers. We're actually born receivers. Everything that we need is provided for us. And think about some of those first words that we learn. Mine, no, stop. They're very territorial in nature, very possessory, and they're intended to put up boundaries to keep and protect what we instinctively believe to be our own. Giving, on the other hand, is an attitude that must be taught. And so lessons like these come to challenge us in our mindset and in our attitudes. Now, looking at the background of the lesson, it reminded me of one of my experiences about 9 years ago where my pastor took a small group of us to a warehouse. We now talk about the old dusty warehouse. And the night that we went into this warehouse, there was nothing in it. Nothing, no thing. We looked from end to end and we could see the entire span of the warehouse. No walls, no other businesses, no electrical, just a dirt floor and this warehouse, this shell. And my pastor walked around and with vision, he said, this is the house that God wants us to build. This is our new space. And we walked and he says, this will be the multi-purpose room and this will be the cafe. This will be our classroom space. We'll be able to pull a divider and make this many rooms out of the space. Our bathrooms are going to be here. These are our offices. And this is the sanctuary. And he went and stood in the place that he declared would be the pulpit. And he said, we'll face this way and the people of God will sit in this section. And literally he saw in his mind the house that God told him to build. But the rest of us only saw a dusty warehouse. That reminded me of that experience because that in essence is what's happening here in chapter 35 of the book of Exodus. We have Moses and the children of Israel. This is after the call of Moses and the burning bush. This is after the experience in Egypt where he goes and tells Pharaoh to let my people go. The plagues have happened. They've escaped Egypt. And here they are in the wilderness now making a journey that should have taken days, that is taking years to complete. This is after the experience on Mount Sinai where the law has been given by God. And they're now at the point that it is needful for them to have a meeting place to meet with God. In other words, they're going to build a tabernacle. Now, this is not the permanent meeting place. This is not the temple that Solomon ultimately builds, but this is a portable worship space, which is a location that God is able to meet with his people. They commune and worship with him, and they can receive and hear his word preached. But this space was most definitely for the sacred use of God. And as a leader, here is Moses. He is sharing a really big idea, a God idea. And as a leader, if you've ever had to share a big idea, to walk into a dusty warehouse and say, this is the house that God wants to build, you know that that requires getting the people's minds around what it is God has called you to do. But the children of Israel were like we were in that warehouse. It was something they had never seen done before. Now, previously, Moses had a space that he met with God. It was a small tent, but only Moses met with God there. This was all brand new. God wanted to meet with all of his people. He wanted a space that everyone could experience. And so Moses is sharing this vision. And quite frankly, he's going to need the help of the community, in essence, for this building campaign. But to do so requires a change in culture. God has laid out this vision. He's laid out purpose, and God has given them very specific details. In fact, I reference Exodus chapter 25. 10 chapters before, God lays out a very specific construction plan for this worship space and how it is to be laid out. And a large portion of Exodus is dedicated to the construction of this tabernacle. So that's what we're studying this week. We've got this design laid out by God. And now there is a need for people who are willing to be part of this vision and to help provide the materials for the project. And that brings us up to our printed text in chapter 35, verses 20 through 29. Again, Moses has just laid all of this out. It says, and the congregation of the children of Israel departed from the presence of Moses. So we see our cast of characters here, Moses and the children of Israel. And again, he has just explained the plan of God for this worship space. He's given instructions to the people, explaining the opportunity, not laying out a sob story on need or telling any terrible or making big promises, no terrible stories and big promises, but he explains the opportunity to build this house and also explains the opportunity for them to contribute. In other words, Moses had building fund goals. He launched a capital campaign. He lists out what was needed. And again, we see the project plan in Exodus chapter 25. And after he lays out this opportunity for giving, he dismisses them. Now, Moses clearly is not a salesman in 2018. He doesn't close the deal. He doesn't pass out any pledge cards. There's none of that. He releases the people. There is no pressure tactics. They're not forced. They're not coerced. They're not kept there until they make a decision. But he lets them go to process what they've heard and, quite frankly, to make their own decision, to make their own determination on if and what they were going to give to the work of the Lord. Verse 21 tells us that everyone whose heart was stirred in him and everyone whose spirit was made willing brought something to the work of the Lord for this tabernacle, for his servants, and for the holy garments. In other words, the people responded. We're about to see the response of people when this vision is laid out before them. And how do they respond? They respond to the vision, the instruction by God. They respond to God's instruction with obedience. Their obedience was indicative because they were willing to invest in this building project. In giving to the project, they were in essence obeying God. If you look at chapter 25, not our printed text, but the language of chapter 25 says that the Lord spoke to Moses and the Lord gave instructions. So when God gave these instructions for the children of Israel to be a part of it, means that they were obeying what God said do. And verse 21 tells us that they brought an offering. To bring an offering means to complete the act of bringing something in. It was done. They didn't think about it. They didn't tarry a long time. They brought what they were going to give. Something in them was stirred to give. What they heard stirred them in a way that they wanted to be a part of it. And what did they bring? An offering. And I took time to look up offering. You know, I'm big on the dictionary, even when we think we know what something means. An offering is a special gift or a contribution or something that you offer up. And the purpose of this offering, again, was for the tabernacle, specifically the service and the holy garments. They were actually investing in the work of ministry. But they weren't, again, investing in just a man. They weren't investing in a sad story. They were investing in vision. They were investing in purpose. They were investing in their own lives individually and investing in the community around them. Look at this opportunity. In essence, they were investing in something much bigger than themselves. And oftentimes God gives us that opportunity to invest in something bigger than themselves, to sow into vision, to sow into something that was for everyone, and not just for everyone now, but even when they were gone off the scene, that this house of worship would still, in essence, be intact because of seeds that they would sow today, that future generations would benefit. This so reminded me of my grandfather's church, and the church that my brother pastors today is still one of the most beautiful facilities I know of. But he sits in that seat today in this beautiful facility because of investments of a generation prior that accepted what God said this house to build and made the investment, made the sacrifice. And here we are, future generations benefiting because of their obedience. From a leadership perspective, people give where they see vision and where they see leadership in action. When they see that you don't have to tell a sad story, people will want to be a part of making something happen when they see their investment being used in ways that are fruitful and productive. Verse 22 tells us that both men and women came, and they were willing, and they brought gold. They brought earrings and bracelets and rings and tablets, jewels of gold. Every man brought an offering of gold unto the Lord. Here they are giving gold, which is an expensive and costly investment. But again, giving is very personal because it takes something out of those boundaries that we call mine and gives to something else. So it's usually very personal to us. And think about this. The children of Israel are in the wilderness and they are bringing gold. The children of Israel, who have not long ago escaped slavery, are now in the wilderness and they have gold to give. They're not in the promised lands just yet. So where did they get this gold? Well, back in Egypt, when God delivered them, God made provisions for them as they left Egypt, and he caused the Egyptians to bless them. So he had already made provisions, even when they were leaving an enslaved situation. I had a couple of connections here. First of all, God allowed them to prosper coming out of a tough situation. Secondly, they had to give because God made the provision. Now, think about this as well. This is also chapter 35 is after chapter 32, which is when Moses was gone up on the mountain. And while he was gone, the children of Israel were very impatient. And Aaron had a bright idea. He says, why don't we build this golden calf and we'll worship it? And so they brought gold to worship this golden calf, which was later destroyed. But there is still gold in their personal possessions, even though in essence they made bad choices. They wasted money before on this golden calf. They wasted their resources. Yet there was still enough in their possessions to give an offering to God. This says to me that even though we don't always make the best choices with our resources, we don't always make the best choices with our provision, God still can put us in a position to give. And we don't have to be in a place of what the world considers abundance, or even in what is the promised land, to give from what we have. Right where they are, they give. And for me, that was very important. Verses 23 and 24 tell us that every man gave, and it details what every man gave. But notice that they're all giving different things, and they give from the scope of what God has given them individually. It was what they had to bring. They didn't compare notes. They weren't made to feel badly about what one person brought versus another. They simply gave from what they have. Verses 25 and 26 talk about the women. The women gave too. They invested in a different way. Not all of our giving comes out of our wallets. And notice that the women were stirred up in wisdom, and their hands were given to do something else. Notice that the women can always figure out how to fund the project plan. We always help get the program done. I remember my grandmother, and I see it even now. If it meant selling dinners in the kitchen, I know some people are against that, but I won't, snub the bridge that brought some of us over. And there were lots of dinners that were sold and bake sales that were had and things that were sewn, handkerchiefs were sewn and made and sold. And I don't snub that kind of thing, because even when you don't necessarily have the finances that you can liquidate, God can put a skill in your hands or an idea in your head that will cause you to be in a position to give to the work of ministry. So again, these women gave from what was within their scope, which was the skill of their hands. And so often we evaluate what we have to give based on what someone else can give. But again, our giving can be our time, it can be our talent, it can be our treasure. And here we see the women giving of their talent. It may not be money, but what is it that your hands can find to do? I was listening to another pastor last week in his morning worship service online, and he was talking about things that were in his heart to do. One of them was starting a bus ministry. And although he didn't have it in place today, he literally put vision out there. And by the end of the service, 2 people came to the pulpit, not to say, I'll buy you buses, but they both said, On our day jobs, we are bus drivers. So what we have come to lend to you is our skill and our willingness to drive those buses. We believe in what you're doing, and we're going to lend our time and our talent to see that vision through. Verses 27 and 28 tell us that the leaders, the rulers gave too. It wasn't just for the people, but they brought materials. They brought tangible things for the work of the Lord. Again, I can't emphasize enough that everyone gives from what they had, but everyone gave. There is unity in this giving initiative. And notice that the culture is one of generosity. They gave according to what they were able to do. The wealthy gave their wealth. Some gave labor. Some gave materials. But everything that everyone brought was quality. They brought their best quality. But remember, you can't give what you don't have. But what you choose to give, what you can give, should be from the best place. And it should be quality. Don't bring anything to God's house that you wouldn't want for your house. Verse 29 tells us that the children of Israel brought a willing offering to the Lord. Their hearts made them willing to give. Their attitudes were willing. There were three things that were distinctive about their giving. The first was that they gave with excitement. Notice that a long time has not passed since Moses laid out the plan and let them go away to think. They immediately come back. There's an excited attitude in their giving. Secondly, we see that it is free will. You see that repeated in the language. They are not coerced. They are not made to do, but they do this freely. Lastly, we see that it is a very generous culture. It even exceeds the need, and we see that later, that it exceeds what the house even needed. Now again, remember, they're in the wilderness, and they don't know what's going to happen next. They are in a place of totally trusting God. On some level, it's even arguable that they are huge risk takers. But you don't read anywhere in this text where they were concerned or worried about what would happen next, or concerned that God would not provide for them, or even concerned about having some steady level of income. But they were willing. And so what is it that makes a heart willing to give? How did they get this in their hearts? Well, the first thing we see is that they are grateful. These are people that God has delivered from a tough situation. They're not in the perfect place. They're not in the promised land just yet. But everything that they've needed along the way, God has been faithful to provide. And he's assured them of his presence. And so they are grateful for his deliverance. They're grateful for his hand. They're grateful for his provision. Secondly, trusting hearts are willing hearts. Because again, they have no choice but to trust God and his provision. Next, visionary hearts are willing hearts because they sow into something much bigger than themselves. Loving hearts are willing hearts because they love God, they love the work of his ministry, and they love their relationship with God. And that's the last thing, is the relationship. They are moved by this opportunity for God to come and dwell with them. I was thinking about this, that God did not need these people to build this tabernacle. He didn't need them. He didn't need their resources. He could have done all of this himself, but he involved them and allowed them to be a part of creating this worship space. The children of Israel did that, and the Bible tells us that what they brought was more than what was needed for the work of God. God moved on their hearts, and when he moved and caused them to give, they gave more than enough. We have a second passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 8. And we see similar writing as Paul is talking to the church of Corinth. And he's talking to them about free will giving. And he tells them what and how we should behave in our giving. In other words, he too is addressing the attitudes which again are taught. He talks about the fact that our giving, our receiving is proportionate to our giving. Now, that does not mean that if you give $10, you're going to get $10 worth of blessing. If you give more, you get more blessing. But it is about the attitude. It is about when we give out of a good attitude that God blesses us if we give from that cheerful place. He tells us that we should purpose in our heart. In other words, make up in your mind that you want to be a giver. Decide that you want to be able to share. I promise you, when you decide that you want to share, God will make the provision for you to do that. And you give as you've purposed in your heart. Why do we give? How do we give? We give because we want to. And Paul talks about this. We give willingly, not with a grudge, not with a burden, not with a feeling that we're being taxed or assessed or that someone is making us, not out of a coercion. We don't even give out of need, but we give because our attitudes are cheerful. We give because we have relationship. We give out of love. We give out of being grateful. We give because we trust God, and we give because we see and know that we want his work to be expanded here in the earth. And when we're faithful to God in our giving, Paul tells us that his grace is turned and it abounds toward us when we give in a cheerful manner. I've been thinking about that even as I reflect on my key learnings from this week. I'm in a space of just being thankful personally, because as I round out my law school experience, I realized that God has been faithful to me. In fact, I want to say more than faithful. Looking at my own experience, I've been off of a job, a full-time job, since April of 2015. I often tease when I'm sharing. I say that when the water is troubled, I have no man to throw me in. I have a mortgage to pay. I've had to have living expenses here at school. The bills continue to come in to keep the lights on in both places. And yet God has been faithful. And this is not about me or me being wonderful, but I'm one of those people, because of my belief and my attitude in giving, I believe that there is never a time that I cannot afford to give. No matter what space I find myself in, job, no job, school, no school, steady income, no steady income, trying to figure out what's next, I believe that I cannot afford to hold back from what God has given me. And so I've continued to tithe on whatever increase has come my way. I have continued every single week to give at the exact same level that I was giving even before. And God has been faithful to me. Not one time in almost 3 years has the mortgage been late. Every provision that I've needed along the way. And even as I celebrate this blogiversary, when God gave the vision for that Sunday school girl, I had never done anything like this before. I didn't build websites. I didn't have a YouTube channel. I didn't know how necessarily all of these pieces and the intricacies of it all work together. But when you purpose in your heart to be available and be a giver, God will make the provision. And for things that I couldn't do, God sends people along the way who may have time, they may have talent, they may have treasure, but I've been the beneficiary of people who have shared with me in that way. And as I think about all of that, I think about the fact that as God encourages us or creates opportunities for us to give, he doesn't do anything that he himself hasn't already modeled, because he himself gave to us when he gave his son, and his son gave his life. That is the ultimate giving. Here are my key learnings from the week as we continue to talk about acknowledging God. We all have an opportunity to give. The opportunity is before us, but the decision is totally ours. And we too have been released to go and think about what it is we can give and what we'll bring back to the building of vision for God's kingdom. Discipline doesn't come from abundance. You don't learn to give when you suddenly get the biggest raise on your job that you've always wanted, or money falls into your hands, but you learn the discipline in giving right where you are. You develop a giving heart right where you are. And remember that giving is not just about your money. It's about your time, your talent, your treasure. So even if you don't necessarily have money to give, find a way to give of yourself. Share something that you have. There's something in your hands. We're all given something that we can do. If I quote my Bishop Houston, he says that God didn't give everyone everything, but he gave everyone something. And you can find that something that you are to give. No matter where you find yourself, We are to be faithful stewards in the season that we're in. When we have a little, we're supposed to be faithful over that little. When God blesses us with much, even that much more, we are to be faithful. You can't give what you don't have. So give from what God has allowed you to give. Be willing to sow into vision. What is vision? It is something much bigger than you are. And it's something that allows you to invest in your now, invest in your community, but also look for ways for legacy giving where your giving continues to give. We should both be content and willing in our giving. Remember that God's calculator doesn't work like man's calculator, but the children of Israel gave willingly in the place that they were in, and God never allowed them to go without. Again, we should all bring our own contribution, and we don't know the ends of our gifts. We don't know how the seeds that we sow today, that we invest in vision and ministry today, just like my grandfather, we don't know years from now where those seeds will grow and land and be and who they will continue to touch for generations to come. So I challenge you this week to consider how you give and the attitude in which you give it. And in the spirit of giving, I promised you that at the onset of our third blogiversary, that there would be a gift for you. So as my way of saying thank you to you for being connected to this ministry, for your prayers, for all that you've done, and just being an amazing community. You know that I recently started sharing my TSSG notes, and this week, my notes are my gift to you. I cheerfully share my notes, my secret diary, the journal with you. And so the link to the notes are available in the comment box below. Download them, enjoy them. Please share them with your classmates. And yes, some of you will ask, there is still an opportunity if you choose to share a donation back. There is space to do that, but otherwise it is an absolute free download. And I pray that you are blessed as you study this lesson with me on this week. Hey, that's it. Last final for me is tomorrow, so I've got to run. Love all of you. Thank you so much for being here. That's it. I'll see you in Sunday school. Bye, everybody.